Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're looking into how you can learn English using podcasts.
Yeah, they're so accessible.
Right. And they're super convenient, too. You can just pop in your earbuds and soak up authentic spoken English whenever you want, wherever you are.
It's amazing.
I was looking through the stuff we have for this deep dive, and it's actually pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like how some of these podcasts even bring up, like, cultural differences.
Uh-huh.
In how people use banks, even. Like, in some places, people hardly ever use checks these days.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, over here, I think I've written one check in the past 5 years. It's wild.
It is. It's almost like a little extra lesson on how the world works.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because really, language and culture, they go hand in hand, You're not just learning words.
Right.
You're getting a feel for how people think in different places. That's what I think is so cool about this kind of learning.
Okay, so let's jump into the episode we're looking at today for this deep dive. It starts off like a mini lesson, almost.
Yeah.
Just a quick vocab preview. And two of the terms they jump into right away are checking account and savings account.
Okay.
Now, a checking account, it's like your everyday money hub
Okay.
for like paying bills, grabbing groceries, quick transactions, easy access. Now, a savings account, that's where you park your money.
Right.
Hopefully it grows a bit with interest. It's more long-term.
Yeah, I think the episode does a really good job of kind of putting those two side by side.
Yeah.
So it's easier to get the difference. It's like those memory tricks, where you connect ideas together.
Oh.
It just sticks better.
Yeah. And speaking of things that stick, you know what else is great for that? Humor.
Of course.
And this podcast actually uses it pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like there's this part where a customer is trying to deposit $1 billion. I mean, come on.
You've got to love that.
It's great.
Humor is so important when you're learning a language.
Oh, for sure.
Because when you laugh, your brain remembers what you just heard, Oh. And it takes the dryness out of, like, learning grammar and vocab. It just makes it more fun.
Totally agree. Yeah, I'm always trying to come up with those silly mnemonics or funny examples when I'm learning something new.
That's the way to do it.
Okay, are you ready for the main event?
Let's do it.
The episode's got this dialogue, like you're right there in the bank, Let's hear a bit of it.
Okay.
I really like how they're using language that feels more conversational.
Uh-huh.
Not like what you'd see in a textbook. It's like how people actually talk.
Totally.
More natural.
Yeah, for example, like the customer says, will you require overdraft protection?
Right.
Instead of something more stiff and formal, It's a small difference.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But it shows how casual everyday speech can be. And those little things, they make a difference.
They do. And it's those kinds of things that make podcasts such a great way to learn English. You're not just like memorizing words from a list. You're seeing how they fit into real conversations.
Exactly. And I mean, speaking of real conversations, after the dialogue in this podcast, it goes into the section they call language takeaway.
Okay.
And they break down 4 key financial terms.
Okay, which ones?
Transaction, balance, overdraft, and debit card.
Great. So let's take those one at a time.
Sure.
First up, transaction. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Basically, it's any action where money's moving in or out of your account. It's broad. Deposits, withdrawals, purchases, even transfers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and like the podcast, they use phrases like, I need to see my recent bank transactions,
Right.
or there's no fee for doing bank transactions online.
So basically, anytime money changes hands, whether it's you handing over cash or, doing something online,
Exactly.
it all counts. Okay. Next up is balance.
Right. So your balance is how much money you have available at any given time.
Okay. And the podcast throws in some humor here.
Oh, how so?
Well, they say something like, my account balance is $2 right now.
Oof. Been there.
Right. It's a little reminder to, like, check your balance often.
Yeah, a universal experience for sure. All right. Overdraft. This one can be a little tricky sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. So an overdraft happens when you spend more than you actually have in your account.
Right.
And then your balance goes negative. The podcast gives this example. Let's say you have $500 in your account.
Okay.
And you spend $600. Boom.
Ouch.
$100 overdraft. Sometimes they call it the negative balance, too.
Okay. And they have some examples in the podcast, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, the max overdraft on my account is only $55,000.
Okay.
Or, I'm so sorry, sir, but you've spent more than your overdraft limit allows.
Good reminder to be careful about our spending habits, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, last but not least, debit card. So a debit card is issued by your bank and lets you use the money directly from your checking account.
Right.
The podcast actually spends a little bit of time explaining how it's different from a credit card, which is super important for understanding how both cards work.
Yeah.
And for being smart with your finances, making sure you know where the money you're spending is actually coming from.
Totally. Spending your own money versus borrowing it, two very different things.
Exactly. And this podcast does a nice job breaking that down.
I like this next part, the Fluency Builder segment. They focus on polite ways to ask someone to do something.
Oh, cool.
Like analyzing phrases the bank teller uses, things like, I'll get you to.
Oh, interesting.
Or, if you could just.
I like that. I mean, those are good examples because, well, they're not demanding at all.
Yeah, they're very polite.
Yeah, I'll get you too. It's like a way of indirectly asking someone to do something.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, please fill out this paperwork, it sounds more like you're offering to help.
Yeah, it's much gentler.
It is. And then if you could just, it makes it a suggestion.
Yeah.
Instead of like an order. So instead of sign here, it's if you could just sign here. More respectful, you know?
Yeah, I see.
It gives the person some space to make their own choice.
Fascinating how just changing the way you phrase something can make such a difference.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I want to bring up something that really stood out to me in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Their little talk about checks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how in different parts of the world, people use checks differently. Like in some countries, they're still really common.
Right.
And then others have gone almost totally digital. Like you said, you rarely use them.
It's true. And that's a perfect example of how, like, even a simple thing like paying with a check, it can show you a lot about cultural differences.
For sure.
Like some countries, people still get paid with checks every month. They call it a paycheck.
Right.
But in some places, checks are like almost extinct. Think about China. Everyone's using their phones to pay for everything.
It's wild.
It is. The podcast encourages people to think about their own experience with banking, you know, like how are things done in your country? It just adds another layer of understanding, not just about the language, but also about the culture behind it.
It's like a little cultural exchange happening right in your ears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that language learning, it goes way beyond just memorizing words.
Yeah.
It's about opening your mind to how people from different places live and think and connect with each other. You know, as we go a bit deeper into this episode, it really hits me how important it is to really listen when you're learning a language.
Yeah.
It's not just hearing the words. It's more like engaging with them, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like trying to figure them out, picking out what they mean.
Kind of like being a language detective.
Exactly.
And this podcast, with its focus on like real-life dialogue,
Yeah.
gives you the perfect material to practice those detective skills.
Oh, absolutely. Remember that bank dialogue we were talking about?
Yeah.
So many little clues in there that you might miss if you're not paying close attention.
Like what kind of clues?
Well, even something as basic as a greeting can tell you a lot about how people communicate. For example, the customer's first line is, "Hello. Yes, I'd like to open a bank account."
Oh, okay.
See that little yes tucked in there after hello?
I actually hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, it does make it sound more polite.
Exactly. It's like they're acknowledging the other person, showing they're ready to talk.
It's like those unwritten rules of conversation that you don't always think about.
Totally. Those subtle things that make a language come alive. And podcasts, with their emphasis on natural spoken English, they're a great way to pick up on that stuff.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really helpful for learners who want to sound more like comfortable and fluent when they speak.
For sure. And another thing that jumped out at me from the dialogue was how the bank teller used certain phrases to like guide the conversation.
Yeah.
Making it flow smoothly.
Right?
Things like, certainly I can help you with that. And what features do they offer?
It's almost like they're conducting the conversation.
Exactly. Like an orchestra, keeping everything moving along smoothly. That's definitely a skill worth paying attention to, especially if you're trying to get better at having conversations in English.
Like a masterclass in smooth talking.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. We've been talking a lot about the practical stuff like vocab and grammar, but what about the like emotional side of things? How can podcasts help learners build confidence and fluency when it comes to actually speaking the language?
That's a great question. I think podcasts can really boost your confidence because they're such a safe space to practice.
Okay.
It's not like talking to someone face to face. You don't have that pressure to be perfect.
Right.
With podcasts, you can listen and repeat, practice as much as you want. No one's judging you.
Like having your own personal English coach, anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. You can rewind, replay sections you didn't quite catch. And as you get more comfortable with the sounds of the language, your confidence will grow. Plus, you'll be exposed to all sorts of different accents and ways of speaking.
That's true. So you get used to hearing the language in different forms.
Exactly. Makes you a more flexible communicator. And we can't forget about stories.
Oh,
A
right.
lot of podcasts, especially the ones made for language learners, use stories to teach.
Oh, interesting.
And stories, well, they make learning more fun, but they also give you context. You can see how words and phrases are actually used in different situations.
It's like you're absorbing the language naturally.
Exactly. And when you connect with the characters in the plot, you're more motivated to understand and speak the language.
It's not just about memorizing words anymore. It's about experiencing them.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about something else podcasts are great for, cultural sensitivity.
Oh, that's a good one. We talked about how this episode touches on cultural differences when they talk about checks.
Right. But podcasts in general can really help you become more aware of different cultures.
Okay, how so?
Well, they're like a window into other people's lives. You get to hear their stories, their opinions firsthand. You learn about how they think, how they communicate, how they interact with each other.
Like having a virtual passport to different parts of the world.
Exactly. You'll be exposed to different norms, values, and beliefs.
Right.
Maybe some of them will be different from your own.
Yeah.
And that's what helps you build empathy and a deeper understanding of the world around you.
Like a crash course in how to communicate across cultures.
Exactly. And that's becoming more and more important, in our globalized world. It's not just about speaking the language fluently, it's about being able to connect with people from different backgrounds, understanding and respecting their differences.
Building bridges.
Exactly. And podcasts are a powerful tool for doing just that. Earlier we talked about humor and how it can be a really good way to learn a language.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm curious, though, how do you think podcasts can use humor effectively?
That's a good question. It can be tough to get it right, especially across different cultures.
It is. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah,
But when it's done well, humor can make a big difference.
for sure.
Podcasts can use humor in so many ways,
Right?
like witty banter between the hosts or clever storylines.
It's like adding a little spice to the mix.
Exactly. And the great thing about podcasts is that you get to hear humor in its natural form.
Yeah.
Like part of spontaneous conversations and storytelling.
Right.
And that really helps you understand the nuances of the language and the culture.
It's like you're getting a glimpse into what people find funny in a particular culture.
That's it. And that kind of understanding, it can be so valuable.
Oh, yeah.
It helps you connect with native speakers on a deeper level. You'll feel more confident navigating those social situations.
It's like a secret weapon for breaking the ice and building relationships.
Absolutely. And podcasts, they're full of humor.
Yeah.
Stand-up comedy, satirical news shows, funny interviews.
So much to choose from.
There's something for everyone, no matter what you find funny or what your level of English is.
So we've talked a lot about the good stuff about using podcasts for language learning. But what about the challenges? What kind of hurdles might people run into?
Yeah, that's a good point. While podcasts are amazing, they do come with their own set of challenges.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the biggest ones is the sheer variety of accents and speaking styles you'll come across.
Yeah, true.
And the vocabulary can be quite diverse, too. It can feel a bit overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out.
Like being thrown into a noisy market with different dialects swirling around you.
That's a great way to put it. And podcasts, well, they're often unscripted and spontaneous,
Right.
meaning the language is a lot more casual and fast-paced than what you might be used to from textbooks or language courses.
It's like trying to crack a code where the rules keep changing.
Exactly. That can be frustrating, especially if you prefer a more structured approach to learning.
So getting used to the speed and the different ways people speak, that's a key challenge.
It is. But it's also an incredible opportunity for growth.
Oh, okay.
You see, when you grapple with these linguistic complexities, you gain a deeper understanding of the nuances of the language.
Right.
And you become more adept at adapting to different communication styles. It's like a mental workout for your language skills.
I like that analogy.
And that agility, that's crucial for communicating in the real world, where language rarely follows the neat rules of a textbook.
Yeah, that's true.
Podcasts, with their mix of content and speaking styles, they provide the perfect training ground for developing that agility.
Now, another challenge I can think of is the lack of visuals.
Mm-hmm.
With podcasts, it's all about the audio.
Right.
Unlike face-to-face conversations or videos, you don't have those visual cues to help you understand what's going on.
That's a good point. Those visual cues can be really helpful.
Yeah, they help you understand emotions, intentions, the whole context of the conversation. Without them, it can be tricky to pick up on nuances, especially things like humor or sarcasm.
You're right. It's like watching a movie with the screen turned off.
Uh-huh, exactly.
You have to rely solely on what you hear to figure out what's happening. And for learners who are more visual, who learn better by seeing things, that can be a real obstacle.
So knowing your learning style and finding podcasts that fit that style is important.
Absolutely. Some podcasts use more descriptive language or tell stories to make up for the lack of visuals. Others might focus on speaking clearly and slowly to make the content easier to follow.
It's about finding what works best for you.
Exactly. The great thing is there are so many podcasts out there.
There is
There's something for everyone.
so many options.
No matter how you learn best, what you're interested in, or your level of English.
It's like a whole world of language learning right at your fingertips.
It is. But all those options can also make it hard to choose.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You might feel overwhelmed trying to find the right podcasts for you.
Like standing in a huge bookstore, surrounded by books, but not knowing where to start.
Exactly. That's where getting some guidance can really help. Talk to your English teacher, fellow learners, or look online for communities focused on language learning. They can give you great recommendations on which podcasts are most effective.
Like having a personal guide to help you navigate the world of podcasts.
Exactly. That kind of support can make a huge difference in keeping you motivated and on track with your language goals. We've talked a lot about listening comprehension, but what about actually speaking?
Yeah, that's a good point.
How can podcasts help learners become more fluent and confident in their own speaking?
That is a good question. I mean, podcasts are primarily for listening, right?
They are, but they can be a valuable tool for improving your speaking too.
Okay, how so?
One technique I suggest is called shadowing. Basically, you listen to a section of the podcast and then try to repeat it exactly as you hear it.
Oh, interesting.
You try to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, intonation, everything.
Like you have a virtual speaking partner.
Precisely. And podcasts are packed with authentic speech examples. Perfect for this. Yeah. You can even choose segments that focus on sounds you find difficult or new vocabulary.
Like your own personal pronunciation coach.
Exactly. And as you practice shadowing, you not only improve your pronunciation, but also your ear for the language.
So you can hear those subtle differences in how words are stressed and the rhythm of the sentences.
Exactly. And that leads to more fluent and natural-sounding speech. It's like a win-win.
Your listening and speaking skills work together.
Exactly. Podcasts are a fantastic resource for practicing shadowing with all their different content and speaking styles.
It's like being immersed in the language, but without leaving your home.
Precisely. It moves you beyond just memorizing things and into a more interactive, communicative way of learning.
You become an active participant in the language.
That's a great way to put it. Now, let's say someone's completely new to using podcasts to learn English.
Okay.
What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. Starting anything new can be exciting, but also a bit daunting, especially when it comes to language learning.
Absolutely. But the right approach can make a huge difference. Here are a few things I'd suggest. First, start with podcasts that are made specifically for language learners.
Okay.
They tend to be slower, have clear pronunciation, and explain vocabulary and grammar along the way. Perfect for building a solid foundation.
Makes sense.
Second, choose podcasts that cover topics you're actually interested in.
Yeah, I like that.
Learning is so much more effective and fun when you're genuinely engaged with the content.
Totally agree.
It doesn't matter if it's history, science, true crime, comedy, whatever. Find what you love and go for it. Third, don't be afraid to try different types of podcasts. Stories, interviews, lectures. See what works best for you. Fourth, take advantage of the tools podcast apps offer. Things like speed control, transcripts, vocabulary lists.
Right.
They can be super helpful. Fifth, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a race.
It's all about the process.
Exactly. Embrace the challenges and those little victories along the way. Sixth, find a language partner or study group to share the experience with.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's amazing how much motivation and support you can get from connecting with others who are on the same path. Seventh, set realistic goals. Don't try to do too much too soon, and celebrate those milestones. It'll keep you motivated. And finally, most importantly, have fun. Learning a language should be enjoyable. Don't be afraid to laugh at yourself, embrace the challenges, and savor those small victories.
Those are some fantastic tips. It's all about having the right resources, knowing what you want to achieve, and having a positive mindset.
Absolutely. And podcasts, with their accessibility, variety, and engaging content, they're an amazing starting point for anyone on their language learning journey.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. I'm curious about how podcasts can be used in more formal learning environments, like classrooms or online courses.
Oh, yeah, they have so much potential there.
They do.
Podcasts can really shake things up in language education.
How so?
Well, they're a great supplement to traditional teaching methods. For starters, they can be used for listening comprehension activities.
Oh, okay.
Teachers could assign podcast episodes that relate to what they're teaching.
Yeah.
Students could listen at home or in class, and then maybe they could discuss the content, answer questions, or even do grammar exercises based on what they heard.
That makes the learning process a lot more interactive.
Exactly. And podcasts are full of authentic language.
Right.
They expose students to all sorts of different accents and ways of speaking that they wouldn't find in a textbook.
It's like bringing the real world right into the classroom.
Exactly. You could even use podcasts to spark debates.
Oh, interesting.
Pick episodes about controversial topics or current events and let the students discuss and share their opinions.
That's a great way to get them thinking critically and practicing their speaking skills in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And then there's the possibility of having students create their own podcasts.
Oh, I love that idea.
It's a fantastic way for them to learn. They could explore their interests, do research, conduct interviews, and even pick up some technical skills along the way.
It's like a hands-on language learning project.
Exactly. And lastly, podcasts can help learners connect with other students, maybe even native speakers.
Okay.
Teachers could encourage students to listen to podcasts from different countries and cultures.
Oh, cool.
Maybe even participate in online discussions or language exchanges with other podcast listeners around the world.
It's like building a global language learning community.
Exactly. As podcasts keep evolving, I think they'll become even more important in language education, both in and out of the classroom.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to AI for a minute.
Sure.
You touched on it earlier, but I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts.
Yeah.
How do you think AI might impact the future of learning English through podcasts?
It's a really interesting question.
It is.
AI and other new technologies have the potential to make language learning truly personalized. Imagine podcasts that can adapt to your level, how much you already know.
Right.
Or podcasts that can even give you feedback on your pronunciation in real time.
That's incredible. It's like having a personal AI tutor built right into the podcast.
Exactly. And AI is getting more advanced all the time.
It is.
So we can expect even more innovation.
Okay.
Think about virtual reality experiences that take you to different countries.
Wow.
You could interact with native speakers in real-life situations.
That would be amazing.
Or maybe even have AI language partners.
Right.
You could have natural, spontaneous conversations with them.
It's like the lines between the real world and the digital world are becoming blurred.
Absolutely. And that opens up so many possibilities for language learning. These advancements are really exciting.
They are.
They have the power to make language learning more accessible, effective, and engaging than ever before.
It feels like the future of language learning is unfolding right in front of us.
It is.
And podcasts are leading the way.
I couldn't agree more. I can't wait to see how these technologies will change how we learn and interact with languages in the years to come.
Me too. It's
Well-
a constantly evolving landscape. Okay, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, let's quickly recap what we've talked about today. We explored the ups and downs of using podcasts to learn English,
Right.
shared some practical tips for making the most of them,
Uh-huh.
and even touched on the future of language learning with AI.
We also talked about how important it is to be an active listener, be aware of cultural differences, and most importantly, find those podcasts that really grab your attention and fit your learning style.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. I'm looking forward to sharing some specific podcast recommendations in the next segment. We'll also talk about how to overcome those learning challenges and explore the ever-growing world of language learning resources.
All right, so we've talked a lot about learning English with podcasts, but now I really want to get into some specific recommendations.
Yeah.
There are just so many podcasts out there.
There are.
Where do you even begin?
It's true. It can be overwhelming. If you're just starting out, I always recommend going for podcasts specifically designed for English language learners.
Okay.
They usually have a slower pace, clear pronunciation, and they often explain vocabulary and grammar as they go. It's a great way to build a strong base.
Makes sense. Do you have any examples?
Sure. Some good ones to start with are Learn English Podcast by the British Council, Voice of America, Learning English, and All Ears English.
Okay, those are great starting points. Now, what happens when a learner gets more advanced? Should they stick to those learner-focused podcasts, or can they branch out?
Oh, I think branching out is key. Once you've got the basics down, the world is your oyster. Find podcasts about topics you're truly interested in. It doesn't even matter if they're specifically for language learners or not.
I love that. It makes learning so much more fun when you're passionate about the subject matter.
Exactly. History, science, true crime, comedy, whatever it is you're into, there's a podcast out there for you. And that's when the magic really happens, when you're so engrossed in what you're listening to that you forget you're even learning a language.
It just sneaks in there.
Exactly. Now, what about learners who are struggling with specific things like pronunciation or grammar?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I know I've had my moments with pronunciation.
We all have. Luckily, there are podcasts specifically for those areas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For pronunciation, there's Sounds Right by the BBC and Espresso English, which breaks down those tricky sounds and gives you tips for improvement.
Those sound helpful. What about grammar? I feel like I'm constantly second-guessing myself on grammar rules.
Grammar can be tricky, but there are definitely podcasts out there to help you. Grammar Girl's Quick and Dirty Tips for Better Writing is a popular one.
Okay.
And there's also 6-Minute Grammar by the BBC, which gives these short and sweet explanations of grammar rules.
So there really is a podcast for everything. It's like having a personalized language learning toolkit. Now, I want to talk about podcasts that can help learners go beyond just vocabulary and grammar. The ones that really immerse you in actual conversations and culture.
Yes, immersion is so important. You want to get a feel for how the language is really spoken.
Exactly.
Podcasts like The English We Speak by the BBC are great for that.
Yeah.
They look at everyday expressions and slang, giving you a taste of real-world English.
That sounds really useful, especially for learners who want to sound more natural and less like they're reading from a textbook.
Absolutely. And then there are storytelling podcasts like This American Life and Serial.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
They pull you in with these captivating stories that give you a glimpse into American culture and different perspectives.
It's like you're experiencing the culture firsthand through these stories.
Precisely. And if you're interested in specific accents or dialects, there are tons of podcasts for that too.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Well, BBC Radio 4 has a bunch of shows with different British accents.
Right.
And Stuff You Should Know has a very distinct American Southern accent.
It's amazing how much variety there is. Okay, let's switch gears to strategies. What are some tips for getting the most out of podcasts for language learning?
That's a great question. One thing I strongly suggest is using transcripts.
Okay.
A lot of podcast websites and apps offer them so you can read along as you listen. This is especially useful if you're a beginner or if you're struggling to understand everything by ear.
It's like having subtitles, but for audio.
Exactly. And it's really important to actively listen.
What do you mean by that?
Don't just passively listen. Really engage with the content. Take notes, pause, and think about what you just heard. You can even repeat phrases out loud to practice your pronunciation.
It's about turning the podcast into an interactive experience.
Exactly. And another thing you can try is playing with the playback speed. Lots of apps let you slow down or speed up the audio. If a podcast is too fast, just slow it down until you're comfortable. Then, as you improve, you can gradually increase the speed.
It's like having a personalized language learning control panel. Now, you mentioned consistency earlier. How important is it to actually listen to podcasts regularly?
Consistency is key, just like with any skill. Language learning needs regular practice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Try to make podcasts a part of your daily routine.
Okay.
Even if it's just for a few minutes each day, the more you expose yourself to the language, the more it'll become second nature.
It's like working out a muscle. Right.
Exactly. Now, as we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. We've talked about how AI could change the way we learn languages. How do you picture the future of learning English through podcasts with all these advancements in AI and technology?
That's a great question. It's exciting to imagine the possibilities. Maybe we'll see AI-powered podcasts that can tailor the content to your specific needs and goals.
Yeah.
Or virtual reality experiences that let you practice speaking in real-world situations. The future of language learning is full of potential, and I believe podcasts will continue to be at the forefront of making language learning more accessible and fun for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.